Hello, my soccer universe. My name is Roland and welcome to Football Talk. What a rotten weekend for me. Both of my favorite teams losing. One I expected, as I will say later on. The other one came completely out of the blue. So 0 points on the first real full Football League weekend of the new season. Not exactly what I wanted, not exactly what I needed right coming out of my vacation either. So yeah, not too happy about that. But overall, I think there were quite some good storylines on this weekend. We had the start of the Bundesliga with plenty of surprises. And I think if I would have gone just by ranking all the surprises down, the background here would be half with Bundesliga teams, which is something that I wanted to avoid. The Austrian Bundesliga, we also had quite a few surprising results. We had the start of the Serie A season, where, of course, Milan, worst performer of the entire weekend based on the expectations. But there was another team that did not do as well that you would consider a top team. However, all the title favorites, other than that, did really well, so that has me worried. I think we can already say pretty much who is the top four, and you will see those top four in the background in my Serie A section. But I have to say probably the best. I mean, there was drama in France and in Spain and in Portugal, everywhere. But I think the best was the Premier League, and it culminated with a wonderful game between Newcastle and Liverpool. The robbery of Newcastle, we'll talk about that as well. Now, before I go into the review, I just want to say this is not the first review weekend where I have all the 8 leagues that I'm having a look at have played, and so I'm trying to find my footing so far. And I have to say, I'm not sure if I will continue exactly in this format or in a different format, so just bear with me. I'm trying things for the first few months of the season, and maybe I want to choose the most convenient path, but I also want to showcase some of the jerseys that I have, because that's the reason why I have such a large collection as well. So we have to see how it goes along, but there will be many shirt switches throughout this video. Well, let's start this weekend review in the Austrian Bundesliga and in Salzburg, where my LASK, lost 3-0. And let me say this up front, I'm not naive. I didn't expect a win in Salzburg, and I thought maybe even a point might be high-hanging fruit. On the other side, if you play well and you take the emotions coming from the win against Austria Vienna, that maybe you have a chance to get that point. And to be honest, the game started out not too badly for LASK. They hit the woodwork. I think the post by Cissé, who is actually bought by Aston Villa already, loaned back to LASK, hit the post actually very early on. And it was a really good up and down game with not too many chances either. And then Salzburg scored more or less with the first shot on goal. Really nicely taken that ball situation, I gotta say as well. And then it is Diabate who just taps it in from a very short distance into more or less the empty net. And then just a couple of minutes later, it's a nice cross in, but Radkov is not challenged by the LASK defense. Yes, hang time, really good, high in the air. He heads it in. It's 2-0 Salzburg after 31 minutes. And from that moment it was clear we're not going to win this game. And even a draw might be a challenge, even though we were good in the game. And then the referee decided to actually decide the game. There was a situation where Adeniran was potentially fouled on the edge of the box. A similar situation happened just a few minutes before on our side, where the foul was quickly given. So Sasha Horvath, our captain, runs up to the referee and says, it's really seeming like that 50-50 situations are going against us. Please watch this. Got immediately yellow card, and there was some discussions. And he walks away, says something like that. We know now, he said, please open your eyes. Gets a second yellow card, is sent off. Absolute ridiculous stuff happening there. Yes, maybe one yellow card I can accept, but giving him the yellow card just because he's running to the referee. Hey, the situation was a long ball. I mean, everyone's backed up. He had to run to the referee to get there and really plead his point. I just don't understand this. And then how the referee insinuated that he might have been personally insulted, when nothing like that ever happened. I mean, we have it now confirmed that he didn't say anything offensive. Maybe, judging the referee's impartialness, but okay, you can take that. Really stupid stuff. I have to say, with a man less, and Sasha Horvath is now missing for the derby on Saturday, which probably hurts more because that game was already done and dusted. To the credit LASK actually did create some chances in the second half, maybe could have scored, but Salzburg had even more chances that they only ended up conceding one more goal through Baidu late on. Probably is a slight positive, but still, you lose 3-0 and you're among 3 other teams that have already conceded 3 goals. At least this time you didn't give up a goal in the first 15 minutes. But I have to say, defensive, that's the biggest issue for LASK. Yes, they bought a defender from Brazil, a young guy. It's again mostly young players. I still want to be rather, how to say, patient because it's another rebuild. Although I fear the way this is going. And there's already some slight crisis talk here in Linz, which I really do not get because there was only one game that did not go our way. But hey, let's see how it will go. In any case, it is now 1 win out of 3 and 3 losses, and you're sitting kind of towards the bottom of the table, but nothing is really lost yet. Quickly running through the other games. Ried, who have 3 derbies within a week. First, they have to play at Blau-Weiß Linz. They win, I don't want to say even undeserved, through 2 second half goals by Poma. Blau-Weiß really not looking good. 0 points, 0 goals, and barely any shots on goal either. So there's also slight crisis talk, but I think Blau-Weiß is a team that probably will be patient. So that was that, and Ried will face Gurten in the cup in the midweek, and then they have to play LASK on Saturday again. So it's pretty hefty week for them. We had the game between Sturm Graz and VSG Tirol postponed due to Champions League qualification. Well, Sturm Graz got battered 5-0 by Bodo Glimt. And again, I will talk more about Champions League qualification once we talk about a preview of a Champions League, after the draw and so on. I will get everything in. But it was rather embarrassing for Sturm Graz, and was even more embarrassing that Austrian pundits completely did not know, or at least most of them had no idea how good Bodo Glimt are. The Sunday games saw Altach concede a goal for the first time this season. That is something that I did not have on my bingo card, that Altach will be defensively solid. I also didn't have on the bingo card that they actually will be first in the table. Yes, they take an early lead through Grail, but Maderna then equalizes. And then the game was very level. I think it's very good. A team that's definitely already in crisis, and maybe the most understandable one, although still it's only 4 games, but Austria Vienna have only 1 point out of the first game of the season. Then they had 3 losses in a row, and this one against Hartberg was a really damning one. This was almost a nothing burger from them. And yeah, only very late on they pulled the goal back, and there's so much unrest around this club that, yeah, I don't know if Coach Helm, who almost got Austria Vienna to a championship, a very unlikely one, will stay on for much longer, although I think he is the least of all the worries that Austria Vienna have. And then we had a really good game between the 2 European starters who also had a checkered record in the midweek, Wolfsberg being largely outplayed by Omonia Nicosia, however still managing a 2-1 win, whereas Rapid Vienna having control of the game but conceding 2 stupid goals in Hungary against Jur. So, they were meeting. It was an up and down game. Both teams really good in offense, not so good in defense, especially Rapid really seems to be struggling in defense, but offensively they are a fun team to watch. Wurmbrand scores 2 first half goals. Zukic and Schöpf missed 2 early on. But with the 2-0, it was clear advantage. Rapid. Sukic pulls one back. Then Wolfsberg is really pushing. Rapid having trouble to keeping them at bay, but they hang on for the win. So on my Saturday then, I expected LASK to lose. I was a little bit dejected of how it happened, but I fully expected Milan to get a full good start to the season. New coach, very nice transfer window overall, some questions about defense, but you have with Cremonese the perfect opening opponent at home against a team that just got promoted, that you never have lost to at home. And boy, we got a continuation of the last season. Milan cannot break down an opponent that sits deep. This is so galling to see, and there's no inventiveness. Yes, there was no Leao, who got injured in the game against Bari, and so we had Jimenez and Pulisic, the mighty dwarfs, starting up front. So it was always gonna be hard, but at least I thought that Jimenez can do something. He actually scored a nice goal. However, he was also quite offside when scoring that one. But if that was going in, then I think Milan will see this out easily. But what happened afterwards, honestly, again, defensive mistakes. I don't know. Pavlovic, Tomori, whatever they're doing, it just doesn't work. Even Gabi cannot even hold it together. Stupinian had a really horrific first half. And so it's a Serbian cross that Baschirotto heads in 28th minute. It's 1-0 for Cremonese. At this point, I was bothered because we have seen this so often. I would say even over the past 2 seasons. But, maybe under Allegri we can pull this back. And yes, just before the half, Stupinian, with his one good action of the game, finds the head of Pavlovic, who also with the one good action of the game gets the equalizer with the stroke of half time. And then I thought, yes, this is now it. Now we're going to pull on and Milan is going to win this one. And it really looked like that in the second half at that beginning. There was tons of pressure on Cremonese to actually get this game in Milan's way. I have to say though, this Cremonese team is not the promoted team that you would expect. They got a lot of Serie A experience with Baschirotto, Bonazzoli up front. They also have plenty of former Milan players. I think there was Warren Bondo who came in the winter transfer window and so on. So, very well. And they have with Davide Nicola a coach who is very well known for making escapes and leaving teams in Serie A. So I actually think while Cremonese ahead of the season was probably thought of as a team that might get relegated, this is a team that might actually survive. And there will be other teams that will be in trouble, and we'll talk about a couple of them in a few. I actually think there's a good chance that Cremonese will survive, especially with performances like that. But Cremonese really held tight at the back. They knew that Milan will have a hard time breaking them down. I have to say that Modric overall played quite well, but the rest of the team highly ineffective. Really highly ineffective. When Chukwueze came on the 65th minute, when they really needed to get a goal, because at that time then Pezzella cross and wonderful bicycle kick into the 61st minute by Bonazzoli, you had to bring on the cavalry and really try to win. Chashari came on relatively late for Modric. That's the big signing that you were after. Chukwueze had come on, who actually was a little bit of live wire, but really ineffective. But really ineffective to me was Fofana. I mean, whenever he saw the chance, he shot and he basically hit the second tier in the San Siro. Needless to say, they couldn't find another goal, and the season begins in a very similar fashion as the last season, and in utter disappointment. Add to it all the troubles that Milan have with the Curva Sud at the moment, and it's just a horrific start. Really not what I needed. So at both of my teams on the same day losing. One I half expect, I always say when they both play on the same day that one wins, one loses, that both will lose. I did not expect, and this is the first time ever that Cremonese won at the San Siro against Milan. Absolute disaster. And I'm not sure how much this will get better from here. You had then the Boniface disaster where you have him, he fails the medical, and you have to send him back. And then I think so far it has all been going well, but I think at the moment the transfer window is falling apart. I'm not even sure you need that much of a... Well, you need a striker up front, maybe even two, to actually help Jimenez up front as well a little bit. But you need to do something in defense as well. The Winter has not been playing, and Tomori, I think, is not up for it. I think Loftus-Cheek, for all his dynamism, he's too, naive in the way he's playing. So many things to work on, and I really thought that at least in midfield we will boss it. And Allegri started with a 5-man midfield. Boy. But it's the defense that really has me worried. There needs to some experience come in. Not so young players. Experience. We need experience there. Probably not going to happen. The other games in Serie A, though, did not deliver that many upsets. I mean, champions Napoli started as Sassuolo, very dominant with McTominay and De Bruyne scoring, although the De Bruyne goal was a little bit of fluke. It was a free kick, a cross in, and it goes past everyone, gets into goal. Napoli were not super impressive, but they got the job done. Roma, at the same time as Milan lost to Cremonese, got a 1-0 over Bologna. with the winning goal coming by Wesley. However, it's also a little bit of a misleading result. I think under Gasperini, Roma will perform well. On the other side, Bologna could have scored a goal. Immobile had to come off with an injury, but Castro comes on. I think this Bologna team can be dangerous, although I'm not sure if they will reach the heights that they reached last season. Fiorentina conceded very late to only get a 1-1 draw at Cagliari. Then probably the performance of the round came from Nico Pass from Como, who just destroyed Napoli 2-0, but watched the 2 goals. I mean, the first one, Nico Pass with a wonderful pirouette, and then a long pass, from midfield onto Duvikas to give Como the lead, or in the 47th minute, then a wonderful free kick in the 73rd to seal the deal. Como absolutely convincing. Lazio, lots of questions to be asked. Gotta say that Nico Pass, probably the best performer in this first round, and let's see where Como will go. Atalanta, also a slightly surprising result, only 1-1 at home to Pisa, even though it was Scamacca scoring. They had plenty of chances, however, Pisa scored once, and then Atalanta could not find a winner. Whereas Juve, so this was the only other surprise, whereas Juve actually completely dominated Parma, who just came out to defend, also rather surprising, and it was Jonathan David who broke the deadlock, and then Vlahovic, the guy that they want to get rid of, actually seals the deal right after Juve have been reduced to 10 men with Cambiasso being sent off. So huge goal by Vlahovic. I actually have a feeling that Vlahovic will stay at Juventus, and probably Juventus can very well need him. The 2 Monday games, Udinese conceded late to only manage a 1-1 at home to Hellas Verona, and then Inter completely steamrolled Torino. That looked scary. And there were so many questions about Inter coming into the season, but I had a feeling like this, that with all the question marks and Milan having overall again a good transfer window, I mean, they had this also in the winter, they had this also a couple of seasons ago, but it's a squad that needs to find itself, and probably Allegri, second time around it doesn't work. Whereas Inter, it's a squad that has been slightly improved. I mean, you have Thuram back, you have Petar Sucic, who actually did quite well, and you have still Lautaro, and probably the best squad in the league, although maybe Napoli is slightly better. But Inter put down a mark of 5-0 over Torino, and yes, I don't know what to expect from this Torino side, but this was really, really impressive. Let's stay with another league that started this weekend, which is the Bundesliga, and it started with a bang. Bayern Munich taking on Leipzig, a team that you would think that actually could challenge them and beating them 6-0. It was 3-0 at halftime. Olise opening a scoring, and then I think adding the third as well. And just when you thought that Leipzig just about might get into the game, they also scored a goal that was then disallowed, I think, for a handball. Harry Kane scores 3 within 15 minutes, utter destruction. And yeah, this was the first real stamp on the season. A slight surprise, I would argue, because we didn't expect Bayern running riot like that. But the real surprises then came for the remaining games. I mean, Leverkusen under Erik ten Hag completely deservedly lost to Hoffenheim 2-1 for one of the shock results of the weekend. Frankfurt, meanwhile, seemed to be in good form, beating Bremen 4-1, although this Bremen team also had a little wobbly start. Augsburg, another slight surprise, going to Freiburg, winning 3-1, whereas Wolfsberg had it relatively easy, beating Heidenheim 3-1. Another surprise result, Union Berlin had a 2-1 home win over Stuttgart, a Stuttgart team that much is expected from, that was actually pushing for that equalizer, but it never materialized. However, it materialized for St. Pauli in the evening game. Dortmund, I think, had a 2-0 and a 3-1 lead and looked like they're gonna really easily win this one. However, then it's a red card plus a penalty. St. Pauli pull one back, and then shortly thereafter actually get the equalizer. We're even pushing for the win. So another rather meager Dortmund performance. And then on Sunday, the 2 promoted teams had away fixtures, with Köln scoring very late to get 3 points at Mainz. I hope that Köln will actually survive this one, and HSV managing a 0-0 draw at Gladbach. In Ligue 1, Toulouse are for the second week in a row, the first 2 weeks of the season, the best performers according to my model, beating Stade Brest at home 2-0. maybe this will be a season where Toulouse actually could push again for a European spot as they've done 2 seasons ago. However, the big teams all got wins. I mean, the big two, PSG completely dominated Angers, but needed a deflected Fabian Ruiz shot, I think, again, to beat them 1-0. They still, despite all dominance, did not look very, very convincing, but I guess it's early doors. PSG, again, will need some time to find themselves. The big story, of course, was that Donnarumma was pushed by the team towards the Curva and got a really great send-off. We'll see where he goes. It's very rumored that he's going to Manchester City. OM was the Aubameyang show. They had a 2-0 lead. However, Paris FC then packed it back to 2-2. And then were probably naive, trying to push and get more than just this point at OM. And then they were completely taken apart. And OM run away 5-2 winners. A couple of nice goals in there as well. Nice get a 3-1 over Auxerre, Olympique Lyonnais 3-0 over Metz. We have the Olympico coming up next weekend. Lorient against Rennes 4-0. Sounds like a really big surprise in a Breton duel. However, Stade Rennes had in the first 15 minutes 2 players sent off, so I think the 4-0 kind of makes sense. Strasbourg beat Nantes 1-0 as well. Le Havre lost at home to Lens, so we're still in the finding phase. But the other big story is, of course, Lille beating Monaco 1-0 with Olivier Giroud coming up late to get the winner against a really good Monaco side, who, remember, was very good in the first game of the season and are probably seen as one of the few challengers, potential challengers to PSG. I think they will be gunning for being best of the rest. Round 3 in the Eredivisie was not a completed one, as Feyenoord and AZ were given time to prepare for the Europa League playoff, so they were given the weekend off. Meanwhile, not really big surprises with the other two big teams. PSV beating Groningen 4-2, never really in doubt, even though it was 1-1 at halftime. And then Ajax also won against Heracles 2-0, probably should have scored more goals. The goals coming through Berghuis and late also through Wout Weghorst. But there were some other results that were quite interesting. Sparta Rotterdam are, after being beaten by PSV in the first round, got a huge 3-0 away win at the Cup winners. Go Ahead Eagles, who are one of those rare teams that are really performing well. They even play in the Europa League this season. We had Twente going to Heerenveen, winning 2-1, and Utrecht also having a pretty good start to the season. They have been in European qualifying all along, 4-1 against Excelsior. So pretty remarkable stuff there. In Portugal, we got the expected results from the big three ahead of the big clash next weekend between Sporting and Porto. That will definitely be one to watch. However, Sporting were 1-0 down, but then a red card for Nacional helped them. And in the second half, they scored 4 goals. Pedro Gonçalves with a hat-trick, also assisting Konrad Hardon, new signing by Milan seemingly, for the 4th goal as well. Meanwhile, Benfica beat Tondela 3-0 at home. And Porto, also with Borja Sainz scoring a brace, beat Casa Pia 4-0, 3-0 already at halftime. But it is the second tier of teams that is not doing so well. Vitoria again losing 2-0 at Morarenj. It's probably the standout, but Braga also only managing at 2-2 against AVS, and Santa Clara had the week off, but they also didn't have a good start to the season. So the European starters behind the top 3, not so good this season so far in Liga Portugal. Over in Spain, 2 of the big 3 had less than convincing performances. We have to start with Atleti, who had the worst start under Simeone, only managing 1-1 draw at home to newly relegated Elche. And also Levante had a 2-0 lead over Barcelona. However, in the second half, Barcelona do turn it around, but the frailties of the Highlands were clearly on display. Real Madrid, though, did not have as many problems, also playing at newly promoted Real Oviedo. However, in this game, it was really more about for Real Oviedo celebrating that they actually can play Real Madrid. Their last game in the Primera División was also against Real Madrid back, I think, in 2000 or 2001. Notable also here that Vini Jr. did not start, but it was Rodrigo. And yeah, that's definitely an interesting situation. Vini Jr. not renewing his contract. Rodrigo being shopped around, and probably both will stay at the club so far. In other results, Betis beat Alaves 1-0. We had a 1-1 between Mallorca and Celta Vigo. Mallorca having plenty of home games to start the season. To be honest, Osasuna beat Valencia 1-0. According to my model, the best performer in La Liga this season. Espanyol also having a pretty good start to the season after beating Atleti at home. They now managed a 2-2 at Real Sociedad, whereas Villarreal steamrolled Girona, who had already been beaten by Rayo in the first round. Now 5-0. Villarreal is probably a team that will potentially push for the top 4, and Girona seems like an early relegation candidate already. Then with Athletic Club beating Rayo 1-0 in a duel of 2 European starters, and Sevilla, another team that I'm majorly worried about, losing at home 2-1 to Getafe. And let's leave best for last, and these words usually do not come easily from my lips, but the Premier League weekend probably was the best overall in Europe this weekend, although the surprises in Germany were also not all that bad. It started out ferociously with Chelsea thumping West Ham 5-1. West Ham, a first team that we have to be really worried about. Lucas Paquetá opened the score in 6 minutes with a really nice goal, but then João Pedro just 10 minutes later equalized. The goal by Füllkrug was disallowed. It would have given West Ham another lead, and Pedro Neto, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo and Chalobah make it a proper rout. Chelsea looking in really good form that early in the season already. Same thing is true for Spurs, who go to City and do what they usually do. Spurs seem to have City's number regardless who the coach is. City may have had all the control in the first half, even had probably the first chance, a big one missed by Mamouche. But then Brennan Johnson makes it 1-0. Was an offside given at first, but it counted. And then Palinha doubles it up just before half time, and then Spurs see it out relatively easy. Spurs 2 wins starting the season. Life looks good for them, especially if you consider that they also just were beaten late on penalties by PSG in the European Super Cup. So that was also a rather positive performance. Let's see where Spurs will be going forward. We also had Arsenal thumping Leeds 5-0. There were some early signs that Arsenal are struggling, but then Hurricane Timber opens the scoring and Bukayo Saka makes it 2-0. I think Saka had to come often with an injury, so slight worries. But right after the half, it is Gyökeres who opens his account for Arsenal and a little gets the pressure off his shoulders. Hurricane Timber doubles up, and Gyökeres then converts a penalty after Young Doman was fouled in the box. So Arsenal looking rather strong ahead of the huge clash coming up next weekend against Liverpool. Meanwhile, open up their new stadium with a 2-0 home win over Brighton, also rather unexpected. Njaya being the first goal scorer at Bramley-Moore Dock, and Garner then doubling up the lead. Fulham managed a 1-1 against United with Bruno Fernandes also missing a penalty. United looked good for about 50 minutes, then Fulham had figured them out and probably were unlucky to not get the 3 points. Other results before we go into the big game of the weekend. Bournemouth beat Wolves 1-0. Brentford, a team that everyone was worried about, beat Villa 1-0. So Villa also having a slow start to the season. Burnley beat Sunderland in a duel of promoted teams. And Palace and Forest, 2 teams that really do not like each other at the moment, play out a 1-1 draw, and on both sides coaches not happy with their surroundings as well. However, as I said, the big one was of course on Monday evening, which I found out was a bank holiday in the UK, so it made sense that there's a huge game in the evening, and it was Newcastle taking on Liverpool, and that game is usually spicy already, but add to it the whole Isak story and it just became a powder keg there, and the fans were up for it. Newcastle largely dominated the game. There were early chances for Liverpool, but then it was Anthony Gordon who actually missed a couple of chances, and if they had a finisher there, Isak, Newcastle very well could have taken the lead. However, it got even worse for them because a Gravenberg shot was wickedly deflected into the net, so it's 1-0 Liverpool against the run of play. And then Anthony Gordon is charging at Virgil van Dijk. He tries to take the charge back, but he comes with such a speed that his yellow card is then converted into a red card. My personal opinion, probably could have done with a yellow as well, but I can see why the red was given. And then when Etiquette in the 46th minute, so right after kickoff, makes it 2-0 for Liverpool, no one gave a cent for Newcastle. But this is a Liverpool team that, as of now, always concedes 2 goals and looks very frail at the back. They never had control of this game, and Bruno Guimaraes manages to pull one back, and there were actually quite some attacks with 10 men by Newcastle onto the champions Liverpool. Liverpool anything but convincing. When in the 88th minute Osula gets the equalizer, you thought, oh, Newcastle might actually pressure for this winner, and they had more pressure on the game. However, more or less in an 11-minute added time period, they actually were caught out once when Mo Salah finds on the other side Ngumor, who had just come on, another youth team player, with Szoboszlai letting the ball pass through, and it's 3-2 Liverpool, who barely escape Newcastle, but they escape with 3 points. So I don't know what this means for Liverpool in the long run. 2 performances so far in the league, anything but convincing. But if they outscore the opposition, I think Liverpool games will always be fun to watch this season. Okay, this was it from me for this episode, going all through Europe. As I said, I'm still finding my footing, but now it's your turn. Please let me know, what did you think about this week's action in all of these 8 leagues, or maybe if you can add something from any other league, any interesting storylines, please drop a comment below. In any case, please leave me a subscription on this podcast or any other of my channels. I always know that I can talk a whole lot more about LASK and Milan. I'm trying to hold back, but I think a big chunk of this podcast episode was, of course, about these. In any case, please enjoy the beautiful game. We have plenty of European action coming up in the midweek. There's cup games in Austria to add as well. And we have, before we go into the international break, quite a few big games on the upcoming weekend. So yeah, stay tuned, enjoy the beautiful game, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!